But the nice thing is that we've been able to reach a lot more people than normal. We have we keep a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel, and Joe will get this meeting uploaded to YouTube pretty soon after tonight. And so if any of you here want to go back to our YouTube channel and check out what we have put up before and just scan through to see if there's anything else of interest, you can do that. And it's been really nice. We have found so many positives through having to meet remotely that we will try to maintain once we're back together. So thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Dr. Wehman, and I'll read your bio.
No, that's too long.
You don't want me to? Okay, well, okay.
I'll tell you what, let me just say a few words about myself the way everybody else did.
Yes, and thank you for being here, and I'll let you go with it tonight. Thank you very much for joining us.
Sarah, you've been so gracious. Thank you so much. And my name is Paul Wehman, and I have actually been at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond for 4 decades. That's 4 decades. And so I have 5 children with my wife between 30 and 38. And at least 2 of them have definite disabilities, neither on the autism spectrum. But I guess in the majority of my last 35 years of work, I've worked some directly with people with autism, more youth and adults, not children. And then in the last 15 years, pretty much exclusively autism spectrum disorder, and really, even though predominantly those who have the greater challenges, perhaps, I don't know if it would be greater, but I would just say at least considered to have the greater challenges of being nonverbal or having self-injurious behavior. Of late, we're just seeing more and more and more people who have tremendous amount of skills, but also have autism, okay? And in fact, I was on a call between 3 and 4:15 this afternoon with 2 parents who are going absolutely, the child is 12 years old, and I mean, I was on with one other lady, and I mean, it was hard to kind of fight back the tears because the child is just going into middle school, and thank goodness they're getting him out of this private school that is, doesn't really serve individuals with disabilities. And so we began talking through, some of the comorbidities of general anxiety and some of the things that can actually happen to individuals with autism that initially people don't necessarily know that they have autism. They think it's like ADD or ADHD or something, but in effect, it really is autism, but you can have these other things going on. As I was listening to so many of you speak, I was just struck by the number of people who had, the so-called comorbidities, the seizure disorders, and some of the other issues. My career is completely and really totally focused on work. We were part of a small group of people in the early 80s that started supported employment, and grew up in Chicago, Illinois, went to the University of Wisconsin, where I got my degree, went to Virginia, and then kind of got to know Kathy Shepard-Jones and some of the people at HDI. And, in this past year, I've had the distinct pleasure of being able to do some more formalized consulting with them, which has really, been an honor for me to do that. And I'm so glad, Carolyn, that you're on this. Last thing I want to say before we go live, Joe, is I am thrilled that this is going to be recorded, because my hope is that you'll be able to use pieces of this over and over and over again to different people at different points in time. There may be families that have young children and they don't know what to expect down the road. And there may be others that are dealing with transition struggles. Because, you know, when you have your child in special ed, you want to get the most you can out of special ed, because that is a federal law. That's a mandate. They have to give you services, and you need to become knowledgeable and aggressive. Well, I hate to use the word aggressive. You need to be very well informed so that you can speak up for yourself and not always have to call Melanie. Okay. All right. You need to know what you don't know so that you can help your son or daughter. And so what my presentation is going to be now, and I'm ready to roll, Joe, okay, is it's going to be transition from school to adulthood, but it's really going to be, as much as anything, really school to adulthood with a very strong emphasis on work. I'm a work freak. I mean, as our kids were growing up at home here, I made them all go to work, disabilities or not, by the time they were 14 or 15. So they had a work ethic. And then at the time they complained about it, but now they all thank me. Okay. So I'm just going to move myself over here a little bit, if you don't mind, so I can see what the slides are. And here we go, Joe. Let's just start rolling. Oh yeah, by the way, I run a research and training center on employment, and we have about 100 staff that I'm fortunate enough to direct, and lots and lots of federal grants and money that we use to do not just training, but a lot of clinical research to try and figure out the absolute best way to help people with significant disabilities get into the real workforce. Okay, so first slide. And we're going to go pretty quick through some of these, okay? So Joe, you're going to click, right? Did we lose Joe or? Okay. So I always like to, I kind of, let's see here.
You didn't lose me. It's just really hard to unmute myself while I'm sharing the screen.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, but I can hear you. So,
but I can't see the screen.
I heard everything that you said. I just stopped sharing for a second so that I could tell you that.
Okay. So, all right. So, the reason I usually start off with that slide about the cute little kids is because, and you're going to move these slides ahead for me, right, Joe? Okay. Okay, you can slide, next slide. Is because so much of the research money and the interest and the attention for so many years, when autism became that quote hot topic area, was all on children. And it's great that we have learned as much as we have about how to provide intervention early, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and at least in my opinion, about identification. We know though that the earlier that somebody's diagnosed, and the sooner that these kiddos can get help in the home and in a classroom when they get to be old enough, the more likely that they're going to be able to take advantage of that early intervention. However, here's what happens as we move ahead. Next slide. They actually do become adults. They become teenagers, and most of you that are on this thread here are well aware of the fact that they do not just stay cute little little kids, but when they become 13 or 14, some of those things that kind of irritated you, like for example, if the kid's stimming a little bit, or is, more colicky than he should be, well, that's one thing, that's bad enough, but you're younger too. The problem is that they become adults and you're older, all right? And so now you're like, oh no, and quite honestly, I don't care whether you have autism, I don't care whether you have a brain injury, I don't care what your disability is, if you want to use the labels, or you're so-called typical, whatever that is, between 13 and 18, and with girls, I think it's even earlier, they kind of leave their bodies, but they do come back at 20 or 21, all right? And by 22 or 23, they almost start to think that maybe their mom or dad has some value for them, okay? So go ahead. So one of the things that we really want to do, this is what we want. Work is good. We get so many good things out of work, not just money, but so many benefits. So here's a slide of where we want our kids to be. And if they're young adults or they're getting to be older and they haven't had the opportunity to work, then we want to fight like HE double hockey sticks to try and get them into the real workforce and have the benefits that everybody gets from having a real job. Okay, go ahead. And we're going to leave time for some talk at the end here, definitely. Okay. So what do we do to make this happen? Did we freeze, Joe? So do we want segregated work where people sit in a workshop? Do we want people to always be completely dependent on people in a big group home? Do we want to basically do things that are only with other people with disabilities? Or do we want to do everything we possibly can to keep their friends who have disabilities, but also blend into the workforce, blend into the community, and have the opportunity to have a normal life, which can carry its ups and downs. But so this is where, unfortunately, a lot of people in our country still are, even though we know better based on our research. Next slide, Joe. Or do we want this? Community employment. Oh, I love it. 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 Do we want to see kids going to community college with education coaches? Do we want to see them go to the UK or Eastern Kentucky or University of Louisville with education coaches? Okay. I love walking in to our Publix in Richmond and love seeing kids stocking. I love seeing them helping people load the cart. I want our kids to be out there and be seen because they have so many gifts, okay? And work gives you that. It's the best single way I can think of for people's stereotypes to change when they actually get to meet face to face. And in fact, if you think about it, that's how all stereotypes are broken down, not just by hearing a talk, but by actually living next to somebody, working somebody, being a customer, somebody who's checking you out or working with you or taking your ticket, at the University of Kentucky basketball game. Okay, any of those types of things. Sorry about Kentucky basketball, not so good this year. Okay, next slide. So the issues that I'm going to focus on heavy are going to be employment, and then briefly a little bit about post-secondary education, a little bit about life skills, and a little bit about technology, maybe some about self-determination. It gets a little theoretical. I'm basically going to work into that as we go through, but when we get done, I want you to believe that your son or daughter, if they're not working, could be working if we could figure out the best way to provide the supports for them. And that means get the bucks to get people to support them. Okay. And that's what we're going to talk about. And that's what we're going to see pictures of. Because I've been spending the last 12 years of my life working in multiple hospitals and settings exclusively with job coaches who are superb that we've trained. I go on site, I watch what they do. We write articles about it. We talk about it. No group is too small. No group is too large. We want to get the word out. And if I can get the word out to the stakeholders, the people who needed to know the most, which are people with autism and their families, that's the group I want to talk to. And that's why I'm so glad that Carolyn is on from HDI, because HDI is, you know, one of the best places in the country. Everybody knows that's been around, okay? And they can really, you know, Kathy Shepard-Jones is a tremendous advocate. She can really, you know, they can really carry the word. So let's jump right into some of the employment stuff. Okay, people happy, internships, people get real happy, go ahead. So when I use the term competitive employment, what I'm talking about is real work for real pay. Okay, I'm not talking about sheltered work where you send your kid to Goodwill or some place where they do piecework. I'm talking about a business where if your son or daughter doesn't do that job, then they got to hire somebody else to do it. It's a job where the money is, or you're integrated and you're working with other people without disabilities. You're hired and supervised and paid directly by that business, and the benefits, if you make, you know, if you work enough hours, are commensurate with non-disabled individuals. More on that later. But there's been two terms that are floating around. I still always just call it competitive employment or real work for real pay. The newest law that is out there, the newest rehab law, which is called the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. Congress loves to do laws. Okay, WIOA. We'll talk about that in a minute. They decided they were going to call it competitive integrated employment. That's fine. I don't care. All right. The main thing is you want your kid in the workforce for as many hours as you can get them. And thank the dear Lord, it looks like the pandemic is beginning to ebb. If people can get those shots in their arms, we can maybe get to a point where we can get back to 2019 again and some degree of normalcy. Okay, next slide. So what's interesting about this is if you look at all the people with intellectual developmental disabilities, of which persons with autism make up a large group, nobody is against work. The only people who really don't want work are people who run shelter workshops or adult activity centers, because it means that they will lose the people who are doing the work in their centers, okay? Competitive employment is preferred by people with disabilities. We've done research, and I can cite you studies where they indicate they'd rather work out than in. Family members used to be terrified of it, but I noticed something that happened in 1990, 1995, and all of a sudden that parents started saying, you know, I've been looking on the internet and it looks like there's a lot of this stuff called support employment, and you know, now there's this thing called employment first, and then even more recently in 2008 and 2009, you know, after the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, the United States Department of Justice decided they were going to go into different states and shut down sheltered workshops because they called them illegal according to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it was fun because I had a chance to talk to a bunch of those assistant attorney generals and tell them all about support employment. And so Oregon and Rhode Island just recently had to shut all their workshops because it took several years, but the U.S. Department of Justice went in there and shut them down. So, but the actual numbers of people that are in support employment and real work is still only about 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4. And that's bad. And the reason for that is because it's harder to do than just drop people into a segregated program. And it takes money to do it. And it takes training of these job coaches that you're going to see. So let's keep going here. I don't want to get too slow here. And we're going to get out of these words pretty soon into some videos. My wife always says nobody wants to see just words. All right. So you got this law here. And like I say, the law is going to limit the sub-minimum wages because in workshops, they pay you, 10 cents an hour or $2 an hour. They don't give you at least $7.25 an hour. Like that's a big deal. Big emphasis on providing training in the high schools. 15% of the entire Rehab Act dollars is supposed to go into the high schools. So it's a good law. But again, it's just a law, and if it isn't implemented, and see, it's not a mandated law like special ed. And so if your kid is not considered to be disabled enough, rehab might not find you eligible. So you have to be pretty much of an advocate. And that's why, a group like yours is really critical to have a voice. And I know from working with HDI that HDI has a good voice with OVR. And so as the pandemic comes to an end, it may be that, you may be able to get a voice. I understand from Melanie that there is a legislative subcommittee or a committee that's looking at autism. We want work in there. We want work in there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the high school part of the Rehabilitation Act built in a thing called pre-employment transition. And these are basically services for kids that rehab has to give money to high school for between 14 and 22 for things like internships and job shadowing and work study and work-based learning. And a lot of teachers don't know anything about this. And so this is a good thing. Next slide. And these are some example of things that they do. All right. As we mentioned, the job shadowing, work-based learning. I'm a huge believer in internships. Okay. And this is particularly for the younger kids. And Melanie fortunately tipped me off that, more of you that are on this, at least thread, are dealing like I am with older grown children. And so I don't want to spend too much time on the younger ones, but I also know that there may be some people that will pick this up later. And therefore, I don't want to leave that group. I don't want to leave the schools out either on this, because the truth of the matter is, the earlier that we can make work part of their life, part of the family's life, the more that you get all the good benefits that we'll touch base on in a second, that you and I take for granted if we work. But kids with autism, I mean, they don't take it for granted. And it's not fair because they have incredible gifts. I mean, what people don't realize about individuals with autism, you do, but the majority of people don't realize that people with autism across the spectrum there's a lot of, well, there's another way to say it. There's a lot of intelligence in there. It's just that their communication, they don't communicate the way we communicate because the brain synapses are different. And so that becomes a very important factor, language and communication. And that's why I'm a huge believer in the technology. And I think our ultimate breakthroughs at helping kids is going to be more and more getting them to learn how to use technology, and people will be able to communicate better. Because I've just seen too many kids that people thought had intellectual disabilities, and they just, after a while, they're doing things like working in a pharmacy, or they're working in a cardiac unit, or they're working in an OBGYN unit. And I'm not saying that they're, physicians, okay, but they're working at a higher level than people think. Don't get me wrong, all work is good. I love work, and first jobs are great, but you should have some kind of a career trajectory. Okay, next slide. So now we get to my favorite thing. I'm not talking volunteer work. I like internships. And that's why the pre-employment stuff in high schools are good. But if you can get an internship, even when your kid's an adult, or even do volunteer work, as long as it's volunteering like other people would volunteer, like go to the Habitat for Humanity, or go to the animal control, or the pound, the dog pound, or whatever, things where normal people are volunteering, then I have no problem with your kids volunteering. But I don't want them volunteering where other people are getting paid. You get my difference with that? Okay. But volunteering and internships are a good precursor for employment if you can't get a job, because you can put that on your resume when you go to see an employer. All right. The home run is employment. Go back to that slide, Joe. You want to get into real work. You don't want to be told, well, you go to sheltered work, it's okay. You go to an adult activity center, it's okay. Because when you get in those places, the longer you stay in them, the harder it is to get out. So you want to get in as soon as you can to a coffee shop, to a Publix, to an Albertson, to a 7-Eleven. If they need somebody to help clean up in the church, fine. I don't care. But you want them to earn money, bring it home, learn how to use an ATM, put the money in a bank, and feel good about themselves. Feel good about themselves. Okay. And the way we do that is, we can use customized employment. We can use mentoring. We can use support employment. And above all, we've got each other. We should be using networks in the community, people that we know, people that are in the same church. Say, hey, and bring your son or daughter to church. Oh, what does your son or daughter do? Well, he works 5 hours a week, but then they didn't want him anymore. They laid him off. He was at Wendy's. Well, so you mean he can work? Well, yes, he can work, but he can use a little bit of help. He could use some mentoring. Well, give me a call. I can tell you, I open up the door for the majority of my kids. I couldn't do their work. Couldn't carry them through it. But if I could use a network, I would use a network. So use a network. When we were all younger, it was called It's Who You Know. Now that we're in the 2020s, it's called a network. I don't care. It's the same thing. Network is how you get employment for your son or daughter. And more on that later. Go ahead. All right, real good program up in Cincinnati, real good. It's a 250, it's in 250 to 300 school districts around the country. I don't know if they got one. They may have one in Louisville. Might even have one in Lexington, I'm not sure. But Erin Riley, who was an emergency room nurse, started it. And we have the videos you're gonna see today are based on last years of kids who were in high school whose parents took a chance on a 9-month internship in hopes of having a real job after that. Okay. So I wanted to give them credit because you're going to be seeing, some slides on that as we go forward. Go ahead. So what do we know about employment for individuals with autism? Let's go. Of all of the categories, brain injury, intellectual disability, learning disabilities, you name it, youth and individuals with autism have the lowest rates of employment when they leave school, least likely to get work. Ridiculous, totally absurd. Only 18% in competitive work. And there are many different agencies and places that collect those statistics, but it just doesn't fit. And I tell you this because I have done this. I have worked directly with people. I've published on it. I've seen it. And I can tell you that this is a group that should be working in the workforce. And fortunately, and I might not be happening in Lexington right very much, but around the country, bigger corporations are getting the message and it's beginning to happen. But it's just like different, you know, beacons of excellence, if you will. And that's what we'd love to see in Kentucky. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beacons of excellence, different regions doing exciting things so other people can copy it. Go ahead. So where do we start to get this movement towards achievement of real work for real pay? Well, we use supported employment and customized employment. And I'm going to talk about that, but in a little second, just a few more seconds, we're going to get into a couple of videos and you'll see it firsthand. Next slide. Customized employment is discovery, which means lots of talk and discussion about what are your son's strengths and weaknesses, planning, job development, negotiation. What can it do? What can it do? What are things businesses need that they haven't even advertised for? What supports are available in the community? Where can we get the money for that? And then almost all of the folks with autism are going to need some level of support. But do they need day in and day out work in a workshop? No, they don't. They don't. But they need some initially. And our research has shown there's about 120 to 150 hours for more challenged folks. But it slides down to a very low number after you get past 120, 150 hours if you have really good training. Okay, go ahead. So first we're going to talk about Stephanie. And Stephanie has what I would call moderate autism, whatever the heck that is, okay? All I can tell you is that all the people that we've worked with for the last 12 years, 1/3 of them had AIDS, one-on-one AIDS. Can you believe that in high school because they were considered to be so disabled? All right. Stephanie was not one of those. All right. But she was one of our first placements in 2009. And I just actually interviewed her for Autism Speaks, and she'd been laid off and then rehired into a different job during the pandemic. And she's a really cool person. So would you run that for me, Joe? Should be a job coach narrating it. Joe, if you don't have sound on this, then it's not working.
Yeah, I did actually have sound. Could you all not hear it?
I couldn't hear it.
No, I couldn't hear it.
No sound.
Okay, so what might have happened is you might actually on the Vimeo had it. It might have been muted on the Vimeo.
Let me see if it works in the presentation.
Oh, it'll work. It'll work
Does
that
that
way.
work? Okay.
Ah. Oh, you're killing me here. It's not working.
Did it not work?
No sound.
Weird. I don't know why it didn't. Because I can hear it just fine on my
Okay.
end.
It's, since we have 4 or 5 of them, it's really worth trying to take 3 minutes or 4 minutes and try and figure this out, okay?
Joe,
Because-
this is Carolyn. I have
Okay.
a suggestion.
Okay,
Well,
Yes.
if you stop sharing and then you go back to share, there should be on your screen 2 little small boxes on the lower left side that say optimize computer video, computer sound, optimize computer video. You have to check those for us to hear it. So see if you see.
Where did you say
Okay, well,
that was?
go to share your screen again. So share screen, and then you're going to see where you're going to have to click on the right screen.
Ah, here we go. I
Those
see
2
them
little
now.
boxes. Click those 2 little boxes, and we should be cooking with. Should be able to hear now.
All right, let me try it again.
Stretchers after a patient leaves, sanitizing it and redressing it for the next patient to come through.
Carolyn, you
She
rock.
also prepares patient belonging bags.
Sorry.
And sets those on the stretcher when they're complete.
Stretchers and bags.
Okay, can you show me where they are?
It's right here. Oh, right there.
One of Stephanie's internships was in the endoscopy department. She was actually the first intern that we ever had in the endoscopy department. We had approached them several times over the years that we've been at St. Mary's, and when we first approached them, they were really hesitant because of the environment in their department and their lack of exposure and understanding of working with individuals with disabilities, particularly autism. And so they had initially said that they'd really prefer not to work with us. They just didn't think it was a suitable environment. And over the years, we continued to stop in and just check in and see if maybe they were ready for us this time. And we worked with we got to speak with one manager who said, you know what, I've seen a lot of the guys around the hospital and they're doing things that I never thought that someone with autism was going to be able to do. So I think there are some things here that we can explore. She was really concerned about the sights, the sounds, and the smells that might be in the endoscopy department. And so she asked us to try to work with somebody who would be able to work with the different smells and sounds and be able to take them seriously. You might want to cut this, but one of the things that we actually did was we downloaded an app that made different sounds, and we played it in the classroom, and we were playing them pretty loudly to see who would respond and who was responding appropriately to these inappropriate sounds that we were playing in the room. Once endoscopy decided that they were open to working with us, they asked us to come down and we toured the department with them and started to identify some different tasks that needed to get done, that some of them were getting done regularly, but they were being done by nurses who were being pulled from providing patient care.
And flat sheet. Flat sheet. Flat sheet.
Once Stephanie was down there, the internship was very successful. It took a lot of education and job coach support. Stephanie is a wonderful worker. She came to us, she really entered Project Search with a lot of natural skills to be a good worker. She's very organized. She really enjoys to clean. She follows instructions very well. However, she does have echolalia, and so this made it difficult for her coworkers to know how to interact with her. A lot of the teaching that we did down there was not necessarily for Stephanie to teach her how to do her job, but to teach the coworkers how to interact with her.
Hi there.
That's Stephanie.
How you doing?
How you doing, Steph?
Doing good.
The coworkers would sometimes provide Stephanie with instructions for different job responsibilities, and she would repeat them and not demonstrate to them that she was understanding. So we really had to work with the department on having them provide an instruction, pause, and have her repeat it, and also that written instruction she responds much better to.
And hello, case.
we ended up writing a social story for Stephanie. She does very well with social stories to help teach her how to handle a particular situation. And on top of that, we also contacted her mom because family support we found is extremely important. And the more support that we have at home, if we put a plan into place at work, we like to let the family know as well so that they can reiterate and reinforce from their end as well.
Great. So we should be able to go right to the next slide. Okay, so that was one example of Stephanie. Now, what I would like to do is ask you to visualize a picture. Let's see here. I'd like you to visualize a picture of her working at the University of Kentucky Children's Hospital, or at one of the community hospitals in Lexington, Kentucky, or in one of the departments throughout the entire University of Kentucky campus. All right. And then I want to just park that in your mind. If your child's 30 years old, 32 years old, if you can work 18 hours in a coffee shop, I don't understand why you couldn't work 25 hours in, you know, in a Starbucks sitting in the library at the University of Kentucky. More on that later. So the big picture, we don't have to stay on this anymore. Actually, the news is consistently bad. Individuals with autism, and for that matter, significant intellectual and physical disabilities get shuttled still in this day and age of 2021 into these sheltered workshops where they get sub-minimum wage. Now the government, particularly under the new administration, is and the new Attorney General, they're going to shut down the sub-minimum wage. It's going to go away. Okay, it's in a federal law right now, which will be passed, and so the days of sub-minimum wages and ultimately the days of sheltered workshops will go away. So one of two things are going to happen. You're either going to be having to take care of your kid in your house, or the government is going to need to help support using more and more Medicaid waiver dollars and get the supports that your son or daughter need to get into the workforce, like an equal human being. Okay, this is about economic equality, folks. All right, we see this on the news every night. We see this in the streets. This is about economic equality. All right, next page. Great pay, why work, healthcare benefits, control over your own life, feeling better about yourself, and above all, we find that people who work are less likely to get sick, gain excessive amounts of weight, avoid things like diabetes, feel better about themselves, not have mental health problems, not get depressed. And I mean, I sent a number of papers to Melanie, which she can make available to you on your website, for linkages if anybody wants to look at them, which basically prove the things that I mentioned there about the therapeutic benefits of going to work. In other words, work isn't just about pay. It's about feeling good about yourself, feeling good about your life. All right. Next slide. All right. So here's the takeaway, guys. The takeaway is none of this works without using an employment specialist or a job coach, or people like to call them, job consultant. I don't really care. But that woman that you saw there that was narrating that, she worked in the first 100 to 150 hours regularly on an internship. That was a non-paid internship, But if we had just skipped the internship and put this gal into this job, then Alyssa, who was the job coach, would have had to work with her and provide support while the work job was getting done, and Stephanie was becoming more and more competent. And we learned this in the early 80s. And the real heroes of supported employment are the parents that trusted me, okay? Because I didn't know what the heck I was doing, all right? We just kind of tumbled into, this is the way to do this. We don't want people in segregated programs. We want them in normalized work programs, okay? We want them to come home tired from work, all right? And we want them to have friends at work as well as friends in the community. Okay, next slide. So this was a big deal. In the 80s and the 90s, it was a real big deal. In fact, a lot of people ended up kind of hating me that were in workshops because I kept on pushing, moving from segregated programs to supporting the services in the businesses. And then all of a sudden, people didn't hate me anymore, and because the U.S. Department of Justice started, shutting down their programs and everything, and Medicaid waiver started putting money into states. And I don't know how much money was in Kentucky, but I mean, I know you're not a rich state by any means, but the last time I looked, you've got probably, if not the most powerful, the second most powerful senator in the United States of America. You don't have to necessarily like his politics, but if there's somebody who understands politics, it's Mitch McConnell. Okay. And I personally think he has an incredible wife. And I thought she was unbelievable in the Bush administration. Okay. I mean, and I've heard her speak in Washington. And I mean, I just think, everybody's got their own politics, but I would be willing to guess, I'm going to make a wild guess, that Senator McConnell does not want to hurt people with autism. He just doesn't know what the capacity is and what the strengths are. Okay. There's some, but let's keep it at a state level. Let's just talk about your governor. All right. There are people in your state that I've already spoke to that I am aware of that have sons and daughters with autism, and they know the governor and they know the attorney general. It's doable. This isn't 1980 or 1990. It's 2021. It's not too late. It's not too late for your kids who are adult kids. All right. It's a paradigm shift though. It's not just dump them from a bus into a center, but, help them some way, shape or form, get into a business, have the job coach take over the responsibility. I mean, we should not have parents being job coaches. That's not cool. And I know it's the only way it has to be done sometime, but Sarah, as the president, should not be job coaching her kid. Her taxpayer money for Medicaid waiver should be, and OVR should be helping to provide the job coach services that are necessary for her son or daughter to be able to, because I forgot whether you had a son or daughter. I'm going to guess it was a son. Okay. Should have services to be able to get job openings. Okay. Next one. Okay. This is a pretty cool one. Oh gosh. Can you make it work, Joe? Got it? Good. Way to go, Joe.
Corey.
We're getting individuals like Dillon from the school system. It's transition age student, so transitioning from school into work. And what we've had the good experience of doing with them is going through kind of 10 to 12 week long internships, which are basically just assessment experiences on steroids. So he was just able to be in each internship experience for a lot longer. And he had 3 different experiences, one on the labor and delivery unit, one in the laboratory services department, and one in the emergency department. It took all 3 internships for us to kind of find the right ticket for Dillon.
Fine.
skill that we call peel packing, where we take individualized instruments.
Sorry, I think my internet froze.
And sterilize
What
them
is-
separately
Good.
from a tray. Version, if you will, with multiple instruments. Again, it's a very time-consuming task. It has to be done specifically in a certain way.
Dillon has several types of supports that he uses while he's working, and they've been ongoing as his needs have changed and as his tasks have changed and as we've noticed different behaviors. But this is one that we use to try. We've spent a lot of time working on emotional identification for Dillon and how he's feeling that day. Because what we've learned through this process is that if he comes in on a good note and can get started on time, then he's usually good throughout the day. And as we were trying to fade support, we were trying to identify at what point in time we needed to be called in from staff in order to come in and provide support to get him started. So this is the volcano scale that Dillon uses, and he filled this out with his school staff, and then we did it again while we were here. These are some additional volume supports for him.
We can just point and say, okay, you're way up here on your volume when you need to be down here. And then, you know, by showing him that, we can go up and ask him, where are you right now in your volume? And so, you know, he'll hear that and then follow through by pointing on the chart. And it's pretty interesting to see that sometimes he's just not aware of where his volume is. We don't even know if he's aware that, you know, he's doing it out loud.
He doesn't use these ones nearly as much because we were able to fade the supports, but we keep them there just in case a new coworker comes on and wants to learn more about Dillon. Initially, one of the job coaches would fill this out with him. He would get a plus or a minus if he completed the step. And now Dillon keeps track of this himself. That Dillon had a really hard time staying focused with his work. He did a lot of stimming, so he would kind of, he really likes deep pressure, so he would press into his face and squeeze his body. A lot of jumping around if he was agitated, and the things that would agitate him were usually too much instruction from us and too much correction, because he does like to work by himself. So you can see there was kind of a disconnect where he wanted to be independent, but he was having a hard time focusing and staying on track.
Sometimes it can interfere with his work pace and his rhythm, but the volume is really what's more disruptive to the work environment.
There are the individual workstations, so Dillon wouldn't be working close to somebody else, so he kind of had his own space where if he needed to kind of calm himself down, do some bouncing, kind of press in on himself, that it was appropriate for him to do so, and he wasn't going to interfere with somebody else's work. If you can match him to an environment that allows him to do some of his stimming, take some of his time to kind of process things, then as far as getting the work done, as far as counting and doing those sorts of things, he's going to get it done.
100.
Okay. So that was another department. One reason that I've really enjoyed using hospitals for internships, and now I'm seeing university campuses like Texas Tech, Michigan State, a couple more that I can think of that are Utah State, is I like to go to places or where the internships have multiple departments, so that the individuals have different choices of things that they can learn over a 9 or 10 week period. And again, I want you to, as you're looking at these, Dillon is about 21 years old, going on 22. He's his last year of school. I want you to picture your own child or your friend's child in something like this. And I know it might seem remote to you, but remember, they're not by themselves. You've each seen two different employment specialists, both who've earned master's degrees, who've been with us for 6 or 7 years. And the Bluegrass Society happens to be right next door to HDI and the University of Kentucky. less than an hour away from the University of Louisville. I mean, two really, really good universities where there is a lot of job prospect possibility, internship possibility. I kind of actually salivate about certain aspects of Kentucky in terms of what I think the possibilities would be. Okay, more on that at the very end. Just so you know, I'm going to try. It's 7:41. I'm going to try and wind up about. I could go to 8:25 and say, "Hey, got any questions?" But I'm going to try and wind up about 8 or 8:05, and maybe shorten a little bit on the end to leave time for discussion. Sarah, is that 2 thumbs up? Good. Okay, thanks. I know you got a pear or something in the other hand, but yeah, yeah, very good. Okay, next slide. Thanks. Thanks, Joe. Oh man, we skipped over Dillon. Can we go back? Yeah, thanks. We have to talk about, no, we don't want to do that. We want the next one. That one, stop right there. Perfect. None of this happens without a job coach, okay? And the older the person is, with the least amount of early training, the more they're going to need that job coach support, okay? And the job coach is going to help them figure out what it is they like to do and not do. The job coach is going to help them prepare and or go with them to an interview and find a job. The job coach is going to stay on that job and help them with the training. And then as a person becomes more capable, the job coach will follow along and check in on them, almost like a temporary support group, okay? And that job coaches should be paid for initially by OVR, who is then going to work with your local provider program, like your Goodwill or whatever, Lexington, Haven, or, all these different crazy names that people have, that for naming their associations. I want you to keep seeing the slides though, because there's something in each slide that surprised me in terms of what I didn't think they could do at the beginning and towards the end. Remember, these slides are only snapshots in time, and all of these people, for the most part, are interns, and then they have become employed. Like Stephanie has now worked 10 years. The person you're going to see next, Damien, a bit of a character, but very interesting guy, and he's worked now for almost 11 years. Okay, go ahead.
Doing what you're doing.
I make a transformer. Five.
Ready, Damien?
Yes, I'm ready.
Damien had an internship in the inpatient pharmacy. He was responsible for checking all of the drugs. They're individually packed and checking the expiration dates. And he also was responsible for cleaning the shelves and just really keeping it very organized in the department. This is something that they often needed a tech to do, but it really wasn't getting done as frequently as it probably should have been.
There is 6 runs to go, right?
This turned into a job because as the internship was coming to a close, the department really didn't see how they could continue without having him there to complete this job for them, because it really is critical. The job really evolved. In addition to checking the expiration dates, Damien also learned how to restock drugs, and then he learned how to make deliveries to the outpatient infusion center. This kind of came about because Damien was getting done with his work quickly, and he has a lot of energy, and that energy was being released in the department, which was causing a distraction to his coworkers. He has a tendency to script loudly, and he was actually getting on coworkers' computers and finding things to fill his own time with, which were not productive and were distracting to the department. His supervisors wanted to continue to have him working there, and so they contacted his job coach to see what we could do to continue to use his assets, but also to help out the department. And so that's how the delivery started. The outpatient infusion center is attached to the hospital, and this is where patients are going to receive chemotherapy and other cancer treatments.
Thank you for doing that.
When we're waiting in this room, how should we wait?
By the door,
And what's our volume?
volume down. Volume down. I wait for Jessica in there.
Damien, it's okay to speak in a regular volume.
She's in the room.
Okay. We just can't shout things like "I'm finished." Does that make sense?
Nope. Not make sense.
When we're at work.
I keep the volume down. I keep the voice down.
How about your body?
Keep my body still.
Hello.
I knock by the door.
Okay, Damien.
It's another run. 6. This run is number 6. Non-chemo. Away, Stephen. Away. Yes.
At the time, a volunteer was responsible for making the deliveries to the outpatient infusion center from the pharmacy, or if a volunteer wasn't there, one of the pharmacists or the techs had to do it. It really wasn't done on a strict schedule, and patients were having to wait several hours to get the treatment. The inpatient pharmacy and the outpatient infusion center decided to collaborate and create this job for Damien so that he was helping their department to run more efficiently to provide better care to the patients who were waiting for treatment.
I finish. Number 6 is finish. I work in the pharmacy and OPIC. I open a suitcase, wait for chemo and on chemo. I check expiration dates at work. I pull expired drugs and find month. I stay off this computers at work. I eat lunch. I follow the rules. I follow the plan.
Who wrote that?
I wrote it.
That's great. Damien's been working for almost 5 years, and we do continue to provide him with social supports at work. At this point, we are no longer implementing a self-monitoring plan and working on it together 4 times throughout the day. His department has been trained on how to enforce the rules, and Damien is at the point now where he has written his own plan, and he knows what the expectations are, and it's written clearly for him by himself.
Where we do next, Stephen? Where we do next?
Chemo and non-chemo.
They're both.
Yep, they're both.
Yes, they're both. What time is it?
Time to go.
10:30, please.
10:30.
The answer is 10:30. Run number 7.
We do continue to communicate regularly with the departments, and they know that they're able to contact us if there is a situation that becomes larger than what they feel that they're able to handle, or that they need additional support. Then they always call us, and we come and provide immediate support to the department and the employee.
So, several things to take away from that. Many things to take away from it, actually. Understand most people that have met people like Damien and Dillon and the others, they had no clue at all what autism was. None at all. So who knows what their stereotype was? But so many people at the end of the internships started getting hired. I mean, at a really high percentage rate. In fact, our statistics on, we did a research study where the control group they stayed in high school till they were 22, and the other group, got the 9 months of the internship. And so many of the people of the internship got employed, like 87%. 87% of people that were in the group, in the treatment group, got jobs. And a year later, they still had the jobs, all right? And so we got another grant. And the grant was to try and figure out why these different places were hiring these people. And what we found was not just because they were competent enough to learn how to do the job, but because they had personalities that were, for lack of a better term, I'll call it quirky. Okay. They broke up the routine and people really liked it. They weren't obnoxious. And, you know, so when I explain this to people and I'm doing like a big presentation, there's, let's say, a couple hundred people in the audience and it's live, I know it doesn't make sense to people when I'm saying, well, you know, a lot of people with autism, they have these kind of unusual, social mannerisms or things, quirkiness things, and people really like that. And they kind of look at me like, well, what do you mean? And so if you haven't been around people with autism, you don't know what I mean, all right? But what I'm saying is that once they're immersed in the environment, it really becomes attractive, really, really attractive, okay? It breaks up the boredom. And of course, it doesn't hurt that, you know, got trained staff network that's on base. And I know some of you, I've got to be saying this guy is in another world. This could never happen here. Of course it can happen here. Okay. I mean, I just wish I was right there. I'd like to try and help you make it happen right now. Okay. Because I know exactly what to do. I know that sounds so obnoxious, but I mean, I've been at this for 40 years. Okay. And I know what to do. All right. Let's keep on. Let's go on to the next one, Joe.
Doing what you're doing.
I make a
No. We're not going to. Okay. All right. We've already done that. Let's do another one. It's not a workshop. Next slide. Okay. The discovery part is important for customized employment. We talked about that. Job negotiation. Got that. Okay. Keep going. Work supports, hold on to that. Job coaches, transportation options, assistive technology, specializing what that person needs, and individualizing tailored supervision, okay? Hey, I'm not gonna try and paint this as all puppy dogs and rainbow. I mean, you know, you have got to know what you're doing when you're out there working in the business environment, because you've got to please that employer. At the same time, you got to please that mom and dad, and you got to please that rehab counselor who's funding you to work with Damien, all right? But if you know how to do it with one or two or three, then the next 4, 5, or 6 are easier. And by the time you do your 15th or 16th person, everybody's different, but you have a game plan. You know, it's just like dealing with somebody who has a heart rhythm problem in the hospital. Look at the rhythm, heart rhythm problem, say, oh, well, we need to go this way. Oh, well, we got to go this way. All right. Okay, next slide. 7:54. Okay, we got to really hustle here. Let's go. Okay, so this is Ellen, bit of a character. I'll let her speak for herself.
Ellen was in Project Search in 2010, 2011, and she has been employed at St. Mary's Hospital since the summer of 2011. When Ellen was in Project Search, her internships were with Employee Wellness, the Foundation, and with the Diabetes Treatment Center. Each of the jobs that highlighted her skills were clerical types of tasks, and so we worked through the hospital to find offices where we were able to do paperwork and data entry.
To scan all the documents, it will be done for 2 months.
Ellen showed us that she really excelled in these areas. She does very well when she has a structured routine, when she's working independently, and when she's in a quiet space. Ellen has a tendency to talk to herself while she is working and throughout her day. She does a lot of scripting and her voice can increase in volume. And so it's better for her and for others for her to be in a more quiet environment. The job that Ellen has now is with employee wellness, and she thrives in this job because it's so structured and it's so routine. She comes in each morning and her job is to do scanning. This might seem really mundane, but it's an important job for the hospital, and it provides her with so much comfort to work through her daily routine. There have been times where we've asked Ellen to do things that were not a part of her routine, and that unexpected change can be really challenging for her.
They're yelling loud, normal voice, normal in public. I mean public and private.
Okay. So when we're at work, which voice do we use?
Blue.
So Ellen has an iPod with her every day at work, which she keeps some work supports on. She keeps this on her desk. One of the things, the background of her screen is what we call the incredible 5-point scale. And one of her challenges is keeping her voice volume appropriate for the workplace. And so this is a reminder for her of where her volume should be when she's at work.
What about gray?
No talking. That means quiet.
It also comes in to play when we're providing her with instruction, because as opposed to being like, shh, we have to be quiet, or, telling her you're being too loud, we can simply ask her a much more subtle question like, what color should we be at, or where are we, or to just even point, depending on what the situation is. Her employer is also aware of this and is able to give her the same cues.
Do I need to take this off or not?
Not yet. Not yet.
For how many minutes have left?
Maybe 5?
No, I don't want to take it off yet, do I?
Maybe 3 more minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is okay now.
It seems like so much of what goes on in the day is really just providing employers and coworkers with really simple instruction to educate them on the best ways to work with a specific person with autism.
And that last comment that Alyssa made there really is spot on, for the simple reason that what you're seeing is the early stages of the customized, really individualized training that's necessary, or the devices to support the training scheme that the person has to go through. But over a period of time, and this is what I was trying to get at earlier when I was talking about the communication, brain synapses, the capacity of individuals with autism. And that is, there's not much doubt in my mind that Ellen could take this job and we could move her to a different hospital or someplace at University of Louisville or VCU, and we'd have to do a small amount of retraining. We might have to, if we wanted to up the level of work challenge, we probably could now, because she's got the soft skills and she's learned how to take instruction. And these people, we started a lot of this in 2009, 2010. Some of these slides are, videos are 5 years old, 6 years old. A couple of them, I've got one left, I think, is maybe, just recently. But I mean, they give you some good illustrations of the durability, the tenure of individuals with autism's willingness to want to work, and how much employers really want to have them there. Okay, next slide. It is 7:59 and I'm going to stop at 8:05, whatever, okay? So how do we get young people with autism from school to work, okay? Next slide. So we know what we've learned now more than ever. Back that up, please. Is it previous work experience before graduation, really having worked, whether it's the summer, seasonal work, written in the IEP. So those of you that have, the 14-year-old that was on there, or the 5 or 6-year-old that's on the thread, you should be pushing for work experience by the time they're 14, 15 years old on the IEP, even if it's 5 hours a week, okay? They should not just be sitting there trying to learn capitals of every state in the country, okay? They need to learn how to work while you still have the mandated IEP. I don't know if you're going to get a project search in there, but you could get an internship. The main thing is that the field is, even though the number of people are not expanding the way they should be in terms of getting into the workforce, the knowledge base is expanding. We know more what to do than ever, okay? And it's just tragic that we're not able to politically exercise our will to get the money that is necessary to get, knowledgeable people like Alyssa and Whitney and others that were on there, helping the individuals, for example, in Kentucky, to be able to do it. All right. And just having a training like this, that ain't going to do it. This is just an awareness thing. It's great for me to do awareness, but the reality is somebody's got to sit there with somebody else and set it up. It's all got to be set up and put together. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we said we were going to talk about critical other issues. Some of the kids will be able to go to post-secondary education. Okay, and we actually do have a program. If people don't go in our project search program, they can go into what we call ASET. It's a post-secondary education program where we use education coaches to help individuals with autism and ID who aren't going to have a diploma, and they go into a 30-month certificate program. It's all aimed on being on campus, taking courses, work study, and then culminating in employment. Okay, next slide. Okay, go ahead with the next one. Okay. Yeah, the majority of kids in post-secondary education programs do get jobs after they leave them. And that's the reason that if you don't want to go straight into work and you can go into post-secondary education, PSE, it's a good thing. But, if your kid's challenged, then you're going to need a specialized program. And there's only so many of those in each state. Go ahead. Okay, and those are the things that we did to make ACET work. And then I've got my last video, and then I'll probably cut it off there. We'll move ahead to the very last slide, okay? Because you can look at this what you want. I want you to see this last video. This was on the VCU gym, and Eddie, I think this is the one where he's doing the prosthetics, okay? Let's go ahead and do this one.
When we looked at ACET in college as a person, to have a person come in our company, we looked at the video that they had of Eddie at the VCU gym, and they did a lot of stuff with the machines and tools, and that mechanical aptitude we felt like was a good connection or good fit for Eddie and us to make a good contribution. Yeah, finish that one and then. Is that this one? So that would be the first one. So you put those down. Once we know what we're going to do for the patient, we mark it up and then make the adjustments in the CAD system, and then we make the true socket. We laminate the true socket with those modifications. We want to make sure that Eddie has enough transferable skills that when he goes out into the marketplace, that he can find a job that he's going to like.
Grab your pencil and make your marks. That's it for now.
I mean, our whole company's based off of working with people with physical disabilities and also some intellectual disabilities. So it's been a neat experience to have someone come in as an intern and be able to offer back to the community and give them opportunities as well to see what we do and possibly spark some interest in working with others.
Okay. Now, Joe, if you could get to the very last slide. I'm going to skip ahead everything. I just want to get to the, I hate to skip over this stuff, but I want to get to the very last slide. And by the way, what he was doing is exactly what you do to make a brace. If you have arthritis in your ankle, which I do really bad from playing basketball so much my whole life, that's how they make a brace. I need the slide right before that, Joe. Okay, perfect. So here's what I'm going to close with. So this guy comes here and does a talk from VCU and, also HDI, because I'm affiliated with them. I'm proud to say somewhat. And shows these slides of these people working and says, hey, that's not that hard. It can be done. Well, I'm not saying it's not hard. Okay. But I am saying it can be done. And just some future directions before we open it up for conversation. That is, if you're going to do this locally, you want to identify the number of youth and adults who want to be competitively employed. You want to identify the number of families who would support it, because not every family wants their kid to work for a variety of reasons. Won't get into that, but there are plenty of reasons, and you just respect that. You have to identify sources of money to create local demonstrations of success. And then ultimately you come back to this networking thing. And when I say reach out to employers, I don't mean that you should go out and knock on every door. But what I do mean is that in all the places that you are in your normal life, you should be most people that if you know of other families, usually a mother, a husband or a wife, one of them is probably working. And if they work, maybe there's job openings, and what are their job openings? And just be attuned to what the potential job market might be for your son or daughter if they had this kind of support. And for me, the most important thing on this slide is the number 3 bullet, okay? Because I know there's youth and adults who want to be employed, and I know that there's some families who can't believe it can happen, but would like to see it happen. So the only way that you really make change in a state is if the state doesn't have one place that's really great doing it, you have to pick one area and make it go successfully, and then get another part of the state that will maybe copy it, and then another part of the state will copy it. And it takes money, but not a huge amount of money, in order to be able to bring in or hire expert people. And you probably need 1 or 2 consulting people, that are job coaches that know how to do this type of thing. You're not that far from Cincinnati. You could probably create a project search if you wanted to at the University of Kentucky Hospital, I suspect, if they don't already have one there. I'm sorry I couldn't get to the end, but I told you I wanted to focus mostly on work. And, whether it's, Melanie, or our new president, our current president. Whoever wants to lead the questions or may have any discussion, you know, I'm ready to go. Okay. I've been doing all the talking, and of course, maybe even a little obnoxiously thinking that I have all the answers, but you can tell I'm extremely interested in this type of work. Okay. Otherwise I wouldn't still be doing it. All right. So I'm open to anything you want to talk about.
I say sign me up.
Oh, is that you, Carolyn?
No, that's Melanie.
Oh, Melanie. Yes, Melanie. Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
Carolyn saved the day, by the way. Thank you, Carolyn, so much on the between you and Joe, we figured this thing out so we could have voice. Without voice, it wouldn't have been so good, you know?
Yes, thank you, Carolyn. I had an issue today, so a medication issue. So I'm a little slow trying to get things done today. So I'd
Joe, you're
forgotten
doing a
to
great
have
job.
to check those too.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah. Carolyn, I'm getting to meet so many people at HDI, but I hadn't met you. It seems like you guys are everywhere, you know? There's so many people at HDI. It's unbelievable. Everybody's nice.
Excuse me, can I ask a question? You kept saying HDI throughout the whole, what is HDI?
HDI, I'm sorry. I just assumed people would realize it's the Human Development Institute. It's like a training institute that's affiliated with the University of Kentucky. And it's huge. I mean, they work with, well, Carolyn, you can answer it better than I can.
I'm in my, in my casual mode. I don't know, Joe, if you could go to the website, that might help. It's just hdi.uky.edu. So hdi.uky.edu.
Okay, and that's where we would get in touch with.
Well, we don't provide direct services. So we don't, but what we do is we do a lot of training of people who provide direct services. So for example, I'm actually part of the Kentucky Support Employment Training Project, and we do all the training for people who provide support employment in Kentucky. And I think we do really good training, Dr. Wehman. It doesn't mean people do what you train them to do, right? So,
well, that's the problem, right?
That's right. But what I
should be able to see it on here if you want to talk about anything you want me to click on.
Well, if you just go to About HDI and then just click on our mission, this just says a little about who we are. And so we do have a number of projects. Probably the one that I would encourage you all to, golly, where would I? Well, I also would want you all to know that we are an employment first state. And actually, Tal, you're on the Employment First Council. We provide the administrative support to that. Maybe, Joe, if you could just Google Employment First Kentucky, just to know a bit about that. Just to know that we are an employment first state. So in other words, we are all, I think, Dr. Wehman, we are all behind all of this. I think our challenge is, in many ways, finding good people to do the work who will stay doing the work, about which we have no control, right? We have no control.
Right.
But at least want you all to know that there's a lot of effort going on right now in Kentucky around all the things that Dr. Wehman just talked about. I think I just want you to know that. We also do have a significant project at HDI around post-secondary education. And actually, we're working to develop what are called more comprehensive transition programs across the state, including one at the University of Kentucky, which would be pretty remarkable. We were able to accomplish that. And maybe one person, Sarah and Melanie, to have speak to the group might be Ron O'Hare with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation to talk about how does supported employment work in Kentucky. We actually have traditional supported employment. We have customized employment. But I think the more parents can be educated about what the options are, and also to understand what the process is supposed to be around the things that you actually had in some of your slides that you couldn't go through, Dr. Wehman, but around really you start with the person, not a place, but you start with the person. and this discovery process, and it's called a person-centered employment plan. So anyway, I think Ron might just be somebody that could be good to talk about kind of the overall lay of the land. And there have been some changes in terms of funding, actually, for customized employment and supported employment in Kentucky. And most of your families do have the Medicaid waiver. So I don't actually think that the issue would be lack of money. I think the issue may be lack of figuring out vision and collaborative working relationships, and then it's really finding those good employment specialists, Dr. Wehman.
Carolyn, is your group also responsible for, HDI also responsible for like some adaptive equipment and renting that stuff out? HDI cats, right?
That's right. So that's part of HDI, Joe. So the Center for Assistive Technology, the HDI.
Yeah, I know my
CAP is part of
friend
HDI.
I have a legally blind friend, and she got set up with, they called it a Merlin. That's not exactly what it is, but it's something that helps her see. Like if she gets something in the mail, she can put it under this thing that increases the font and makes it high contrast so she can see it.
And so, yes, so that's part of HDI, but that's part of the CATS network. And that's actually, that technology piece is actually statewide. Vocational rehabilitation also has rehabilitation technology specialists. They OBR contracts with us and to oversee that. So I feel like there are resources. It's about often bringing them together with a robust, I would call it, planning process. So I would also add one more commercial break. And Dr. Wehman, you may be familiar with what are called these Charting the Life Course tools. And Sarah or Mel, I could send you some. I think it'd be great to post on your website that are just really, I think, very powerful tools around helping families and people themselves to have vision for their life, and some real great tools around employment.
Yeah.
Okay, I would just like to follow through on what you're saying. So I introduced myself and I said my grandson is 16 years old. He's a junior in high school. So we set up his IEP for next year. This is supposedly his senior year. We weren't planning on keeping him until 21, but you know, everything is fluid nowadays. And they said to me, well, we'll put him in a work study program next year. We'll get him a job in Walmart. My grandson is carrying an AB average. I don't want him putting canned goods on a shelf in Walmart if this is supposed to be a job opportunity for him to get a career. That's where I was in school. So I said, I'm not signing off on that. You have to find him a job that I can say there's a possibility he could get a career out of it. It seemed that the special education department in Madison County had no idea that they could do something like that. You know, I mean, I was kind of like, if I didn't put my foot down, that's what he would.
Good for you. Good for you. I think other people on this call could talk better about that than I probably can, but good for you. Also, I think I would ask the school about pre-employment transition services. They're called capital E, capital T, capital S, pre-employment training services, pre-employment transition services. Maybe Dr. Wehman or Tao, you can tell me which one it is. But school districts should be able to offer that as well.
Yeah, one of the things we did talk about that earlier in the slides. It was with the new rehabilitation law, Marianne, requires Voc Rehab to work with the schools locally. Okay, and well, I will say that I think that everybody's first job may not necessarily be the one that they want to have for the rest of their life. And that some good things can come out of any job, like learning how to get there on time and dress well and listen to your supervisor. If you've got somebody who you know is going to have a higher trajectory, then at a bare minimum, you should probably be getting at least what I would be inclined to do would be, if they want to get them a part-time job at Walmart, fine and dandy, but you also want an internship for 3 days a week at the local engineering firm, a local hospital that's got, an infusion center, okay, where he could learn about, chemicals going into people's bodies who have cancer or who have rheumatoid arthritis or things like that. In other words, be careful not to turn away from any school that says they're going to get your kid a job, even if it's a kind of a crummy job, because so many schools won't even come close to even doing that. Okay. So what I do is I try and get at least 15 hours of work of paid employment. But then I'd also like to have, especially since he's as old as 16, I like to have at least 10 or 12 hours a week of, or maybe it's the other way around, maybe 10 hours of paid employment and 15 hours of an internship that had progressively more skills that he had to learn, because that would then allow you to realize whether or not maybe he could be going into a community college initially that would have where he could learn a technical skill. Okay. Right now, the problem is we probably don't know what his true skills are and what his true loves are. And how would he know unless he could sample some of those? Sort of like we did with the Project Search. And at 16, there's no need. He doesn't have to be thrown out at 18. He can go to 21 years old. Okay. And you really want to take advantage of that special ed law as long as you can. And if you've got a 16-year-old who's been labeled with autism, but he's bright, okay, then you want to find out what some of those potential career paths may be. And that means push them, just like Carolyn said. Carolyn's right on. By the way, Marianne, I want to apologize to both you and Carolyn for not talking more about HDI. I just wasn't thinking that way. I should have put you to that website, but I knew there's a support employment project at SDI that did training, and I've also Carolyn met Harold Kleiner and some of his folks he works with at Kentucky Works. I haven't seen him for a long time, but no Milt, and so I think there are any of a number of people at the Human Development Institute that are more than qualified to do the training. Now, Carolyn, I will tell you that my friend John Butterworth, that was a big initiator of the Employment First initiatives, will be the first to tell you that we're a Virginia First state too. In Virginia, we're not very good, and the reason we're not is because we can't get the agencies to talk to each other. So one agency, VR, is doing what they're doing, and education is doing what they're doing, and DD's got their thing over here, and so there isn't really they may come to a meeting 2 or 3 times a year, but nobody's putting dollars down on the table about, okay, which 4 sites, in the state are we going to have, maybe 4 Employment First high schools, for example, just theoretically. Okay. In other words, there's no shortage of ideas. And, I wish that, as an active consultant, it was easy just to jump on a plane and fly and sit there and sit around a table with you, Carolyn, and some of your colleagues, and we could kind of brainstorm with, some of these folks who were interested, and see if eventually see if OVR and DD would kick in some money. We could do a small little demonstration of maybe 10 or 12 kids, they coming out of high school, or maybe a handful of them that could be adults, whatever people thought would be a good thing for the state that would look good to do. I mean, but, the pandemic has kind of messed everybody up, and kind of slowed us down, hasn't it? So, but
I had a quick question too.
Go ahead.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Joe. Yeah.
So my question is about, like my son is 13, but he is, and I know other people are gonna probably have this question too. He is minimally verbal and he does use some echolalia, but his condition is regressive and degenerative. Now, how do you, like, if he were to make it to that point of getting employed and that sort of thing, how would you go about dealing with a person who has all of these limitations, both physical and developmental delays and that sort of thing? How would you go about doing that? Because like he uses a wheelchair, a transport chair for long distance walking. So I saw in the videos there were some people who were walking pretty far. He can't do that. So how would you deal with
No,
that
I
sort of
know,
thing?
but if you look at Ellen, she didn't move all day long. She's just sitting doing scanning all day long in front of
True.
a computer. All right. Now, you asked me 2 or 3 questions there,
I did.
and that's fine. We work with kids at our children's hospital, muscular dystrophy, and some of these kids aren't going to live that long, but we didn't stop them from trying to get employment because we don't know how long they're going to live. We don't know what orphan drugs are going to become available, and we're not God. Okay. And so all kids should have an opportunity to experience work. Okay. And, even if it's for a small number of hours per week, he has multiple disabilities, but because he's in a wheelchair, and if you want him to work and he wants to work, then, I forget, geez, Carolyn, I forget the name of the person. I want to say, it's the person who does a lot of your community support work around the state, I think. Forget her name now. She's really pleasant, and she does universal design, and she does a lot of assistive technology. And the Human Development Institute is extremely good at AT. All right, so I would get on their website and I would inquire about what kind of resources might be necessary, because you can't count on the school to do that. I mean, the school is going to just do what is in their curriculum in the classroom. So, but
My son is homeschooled too. So, my son is homeschooled.
Oh, he's
So,
homeschooled. Oh, so you got more control over that.
yeah, I have quite a bit because I do his homeschooling. And we spend a lot of time already out in the community and things. I'm not like knocking anything because, I don't know what the future holds. I just know that there are going to be people who have this question about, if their loved one has all of these limitations, how do you execute that sort of thing with trying to get them into some kind of employment that they're going to enjoy and actually want to do?
Well, listen. I've been around too long to lie to any parent, okay, or mislead any parent. The more challenges that you layer on top of any human being, it gets that much more difficult. But I can tell you, and Carolyn hit the nail on the head, and that's getting good, dedicated people like you saw in our slides. And honestly, again, though, you're next to the University of Louisville, you're next to the University of Kentucky, you've got people coming out of psychology. I mean, we don't the people that we hire for our staff really aren't coming out of rehab counseling. They're coming out of psychology, okay, or they're coming out of special education, and in some cases even social work, okay. And then we train them in these things, okay. And you know, again, I'm a rookie with the Human Development Institute, but the deeper and deeper I get into the resources there, the more clear it is to me that it's like kind of a combination of multiple departments. It's sort of like, you know, a rehab counseling department and a psychology department and a, you know, social work department again, you know, I mean, there's just a variety of different expertise that is sitting, you know, in that center, that especially if you're a homeschooler, you should be on that website and, you know, asking. And if your child has got uncontrollable seizures, or your child has got, you know, then you've got a medical issue that you've got to deal with. Okay. If your child has seizures, can be controlled with medicine, but has a regressive or degenerative disease, again, unless somebody says that he's going to die in 3 to 6 months, I mean, I just don't think that you pull the plug. I mean, I think you do everything you can to give that person as full a life as possible. And so, you know, especially if you're homeschooling, there's a lot on the internet that will give you ideas. And, you know, I've only had a little bit of time here with you this evening, but, and I'm more than happy to stay longer here. I just wish I could solve your problem. Okay. Your challenge. I mean, it's clearly got some challenges, there's no question, but, how about other people? Anybody else like to communicate or talk? Sarah, you're muted.
The question. Did you have a specific question for me, or are you wrapping up?
Oh no, I'm not wrapping up at all. I mean, I could do this at 10:30 if you want. I mean, I would think you guys would probably want to wrap up and be sick of hearing me.
Oh, I wasn't talking to you. You must have thought I was. Yeah.
Sorry, I saw your mouth going. I wasn't sure. Okay, go back on mute. Sorry. Go ahead, Marianne.
I have another question. So we were interested in my grandson. I was in education, so I've been working very hard since I've had custody to try to do something. There was a local college that ran a workshop for its professors to accept the autistic child. And they brought a speaker in from Boston. And the speaker was basically saying that they had offered it to all the people that were working in the college. And that's how I got into the workshop, through the back door. And they were talking about the professors teaching. They'd have to change their way of teaching. For example, you can't send an English teacher can't send an autistic child out to do an interview. You know, they probably would not be able to fulfill that assignment. And a couple of the professors got very angry that they had to change their way of teaching. In other words, if they got into college, then they have to adapt to us. We don't have to adapt to them.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the kids don't have any supports. You know, they had an IEP in school. They have a support that saying this is legal and you have to do this. So.
But stop right there. If they get a diagnosis from a psychologist or you know, their doctor documenting their disability, and of course males with disabilities are horrible. They don't want to use their letter of accommodation from the disabilities. See, every college has a disability service center. Okay, you take that letter, that documentation, and you say, I'm going to need help. Okay, well, you can get extra time for your tests. You can get your curriculum adjusted. And you would be surprised at the fact that a number of faculty, and I think it's partly because it is 2020 and faculty are not all 80 years old anymore. They have friends that have had kids with disabilities, and their sensitivity level is gradually increasing. Now, I do agree that most professors don't want to change. Like, old dogs don't want to learn new tricks, which is why we were using education coaches in that one clip that I showed you, where we run this ACE 30-month program, because it's easier if we had an education coach would be somebody we would hire for 11 or 12 hours an hour that was a student at the university in a helping profession. And they would go in with somebody from the Disability Service Center, and they kind of advocate for them with the professor. And the professors, a lot of them are curmudgeons, but many of them actually deep down, they just don't know what to do. And if you help them a little bit, they're willing to work with you. Okay. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that everybody is going to fall under that same pathway. All right. The other thing is that you mentioned English. Well, even at a smaller college, there are multiple sections of a given course, which will have different professors. So if you have a professor you don't like, or you think is being unfair, you switch to another section and you try and get a different professor. So, these are things that I'm telling you, which I think are relevant for you, particularly because it sounds like your grandson may be facing that at some point at a community college. Remember, he will not have a mandated service like in special ed, but he could use what's called a 504 plan, which is under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. The 504 plan does not have the power of an IEP, but it means you cannot discriminate against somebody because they have a disability, okay? And therefore, they should make accommodations. Now, some of these individuals are much more difficult to deal with than others, okay? It just isn't like special ed. But you do have, if you bring that letter of accommodation into a classroom, the majority of teachers, they may think what they want to think, but they are supposed to. And if they don't, the disability services people are going to get on their back, change the way they give some of their tests. So if somebody can't write well, it should be read to them and given to them orally. Okay. Extra tutoring, extra time for tests, things like that. Okay.
All right. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I hope that's what you wanted, Melanie.
That was great.
Okay.
Oh, it was great. Thank you so much for Dr. Wehman for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you, Sarah. And
thank you.
You
A lot
know,
of inspirational suggestions and
well, you know, I
instances.
feel bad that Carolyn was with Support Employment Works, and I didn't know that. But at least we do now. You know.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah.
No, that's all right. She's a great resource all the time around here.
Well,
Yeah,
well, let me just say this, and I'm treading on thin ice here, but if it's an employment first state, you have the director who I know is interested in work for people with disabilities, and Kathy Shepard Jones.
Yes.
You have a support employment training program. You have Kentucky Works for transition. You have assistive technology at HDI. Then it seems to me, and I will suggest this to the person I'm working with that brought me in there this week, that there is really no reason to not have some kind of a small demonstration in the Lexington area for autistic adults or you know, later in youth adults that could be set up so that the 13-year-olds and the 15-year-olds and the 5-year-olds would have something settled and used. And If it meant that, you know, we had to recruit staff for training, then we would try and do that through OVR. Okay. And, you know, I'm like a dog on a bone. Okay. I mean, if I get into something, I'll get into it, but only if you want me to.
Are you talking specifically about internships?
No, I'm talking about jobs, going directly to jobs. Because at 20, at 26, 22, 32, if the decision for everybody of your group was that you wanted an internship program that then led to a job, then I could probably push it that way. But if you wanted to go straight to a job, then it would mean more hours on the site. But I would still go for that. I would go for that. And I would probably go for that more because they're older now. Okay. But, you know, that's not my decision. That's your decision and your board of directors decision.
You're right. Right.
Dr.
I
Wehman,
can do either. I can do either. Yeah.
this is Melanie. I like the idea of separating the different age groups out, because I think that the unique needs of a young person that's still in high school is
Internship would be helpful.
yeah, it really would. It really would. And then, but thinking about the older individual, their needs are different. You know, they've been out in the community for longer, and they maybe have tried different kinds of jobs. To be honest, I think an internship would be a good idea to be able to try, because what this is all about is educating employers as well about the what in you know what these individuals bring to the workforce, you know, what bring to the employment place. And so having opportunities either way would be wonderful. Ideally, I love the idea of having an opportunity for someone to eventually have meaningful employment, whether it be part-time or three-quarter time or full-time. But I just think and I have to put this in the caveat, is I want to be able to make sure that the whole continuum of individuals is inclusive, because while I celebrate our individuals that have different cognitive abilities, I also want to focus and make sure that we're not leaving out individuals that have more have higher support
Yeah,
needs.
I agree. I agree completely with that. I think the concept of an internship program starting at, let's say hypothetically you wanted to start an internship program at the University of Kentucky Hospital, okay, or the Children's Hospital, for example. I think you could sell that probably easier than, you know, than, hey, let's hire people right away, okay? Because then everybody gets to know everybody, and from that point on, they get to see what they like. Each party gets to know what each other likes, and I honestly don't know. You could easily do an internship for adults, but a lot of parents might be like, "Hey,
wait a minute,
I want to get moving here." Okay, I don't want to. I want to. But if the idea of the internship is not just to have a permanent internship, but that it's going to end after 6 months to 9 months into employment, and they're going to be voc rehab clients, then yeah, I guess I would favor an internship. Okay. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd like to be able to create an internship, be it project search or not, but an internship at a hospital there in Lexington, and then focus on autism. And there's going to be anywhere from 50 to 75 departments. And, you know, honestly, bring one or two of my people from Virginia in, or you could try and get the Cincinnati people in, and that doesn't matter to me, but people that know what they're doing, to talk to department heads, and like probably somebody who's like the chief operating officer has got to buy in. And boy, you would be surprised, because this is what hospitals do, is they help people. Okay. And so the main thing you have to do is avoid the situation where they try and stick everybody in facilities or food service. Okay. There's a whole variety of different tasks that could be done, and we can tell them what to do. So if you have a 22-year-old or 23-year-old, they wouldn't qualify under special ed. But if voc rehab, see, normally the way these programs work is you have voc rehab, and then you have the Department of Mental Health, retardation, or developmental disability, whatever it's called. You know, now it's intellectual disability, but you know, whatever. And they team up together, and sometimes they team up with special ed if it's for you know, in the schools. But if it's for adults, then you're going to get more adult agencies involved. Okay. Now, you know, Carolyn was saying that there's plenty of money in the Medicaid waiver. Good for you. There's not in our state. People are waiting for years to get on a Medicaid waiver. So, I mean, it's difficult to get them in Virginia. But, you know, if your waiver is written to provide funding for a job coach, hallelujah. Hallelujah, because that means that then you're going to have access long-term to somebody that can be a support for your son or daughter.
We have a question from Facebook too, so whenever you're ready for that.
Bring it on.
The question is from Jennifer Maynier. I don't know if I'm saying that right. She says, what do you say to parents or caregivers who don't want their ASD ID child to get a job because they will lose SSI, or they say once you lose it, they won't get it back? Pervasive issue.
I say I understand. And the reason that probably 75% of the 300 or 400 people that we've placed over the last 30 years, they cliff out at 23 or 24 hours or a week. Yeah. Because after that, their cash benefit starts to go down from $745 to $800 a month. And of course they lose their medical, you know, assistance card. And so so what we've had to come to grips with many of our placements over the years is to take the part-time employment that is 20 to 25 hours per week, $9-10 an hour. And then on top of that, they still keep their cash benefit, which is now, I think, pushing $800 a month. Okay. And they don't get benefits from the company. They get the benefits from the federal government. Now, some of them, like most of the ones that you saw, are up to 32 and 33 hours. And they are full-time workers. And so when they were laid off during the pandemic, they got unemployment insurance from the state of Virginia. Okay. And actually those people technically would go on SSDI because they now have an employment history. Okay. And their employment would be, the money that they would get would be getting a portion of what their earnings were, because, you know, and to me, you know, it's not for me to tell parents to gamble on losing SSI. But at the same breath, you can work to a certain level without losing SSI and have that as a fallback, but still be able to have the experience of working, I think 24 hours a week is what it is now, something like that. Okay. And then if people are working several years at 24 hours a week and the employer says that they want them for 30 or 32 hours a week, then, you know, a decision has to be made, because sometimes, you know, I mean, we've had people, not as many as I'd like, but we've had people that have, you know, taken retirement after 25 years. Okay. They worked at some places. I mean, I'm not talking about what you've seen here, but on some of the earlier placements that we made in the 80s. So it's a great question. It's a consistent problem. And I've told the people that I know in Congress that they should just give everybody SSI and still let them get 40 hours of work. because 98% of the people are on SSI anyway. Most people are getting some SSI with significant disability. So why not give them keep that? And that's what people like me, I'm over 66, obviously. So I get Social Security, but I still work full time. They're not taking money away from me, you know? So, I mean, if somebody has this disability, I think that my personal view is that they shouldn't have to worry about it. They should have that employment until they've proven that they can really work. So, but that's the way it is. You know, the congressmen and the senators don't want to be in a position where they look like they're, you know, taking things away from people with disabilities, but in that well-meaning way, they're still blocking the opportunity for the growth that real work gives them. Okay. And it keeps them, unfortunately, in segregated situations or just staying at home for the rest of their life until the parents pass away. Then they have to, who knows where they're going to go then, you know? So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a good question.
You've had a long day. You've put in a lot of work tonight. I don't know, Joe, if you see any other questions on Facebook or if anybody else wants to pop in with something quickly, but if not, we will say thank you to our
Sarah, they can send me an email too if they want, you know.
All right.
P. Wehman at vcu.org. No problem.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
And probably if anybody has anything else that they need us to forward to Dr. Wehman, you can send it to one of us.
Melanie knows how to
There
get
were
it.
no other questions on Facebook either.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it so much.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye. Thanks everybody for joining. Mel, thanks a lot. It was great. Joe, thanks so much. You had to do extra hard work.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
You had to be extra on your toes, even though you had your back injections.
Yeah, that
Oh.
was definitely interesting.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
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 I had trigger point injections today and they told me to, because I kind of screamed at them last time, they told me to take Valium before. So I'm not like totally on my game right now.
Oh gosh.
I've got to go do some
Oh, go rest. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
It was
thank
probably
you.
the worst time ever for you to have such a presentation that you had to be next screen, Joe.
Yeah, I was
We can't hear
like,
Joe.
I know I'm trying to like go as fast as I can. And I'm like, I can't make it go any faster.
Oh gosh. Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
It was a pretty demanding Zoom one. All right.
But
Well,
that's totally fine.
okay,
At least
good.
I didn't have to like be like going out and all of that. Because basically everything after that, if I had to drive, I was like, no, I'm not doing it.
Oh, true. This
Yeah.
has been really good. I thought. I think just being able to do these at home.
Yeah.
It's the best.
I'm glad our
Well-
CS people came on. The reason why they're interested in having guest speakers like we do.
Oh.
But I've been telling them, you know, I'm one person. So yeah.
I'm sure Mel could just find speakers for your meetings too.
Oh, thanks, Sarah.